I didn't think my life was unusual back then. I went to school, I came home, I did what I was supposed to do. But inside, I always felt like I was standing slightly to the side of everything. Every morning, I put on my uniform and checked my reflection quickly, not because I liked what I saw, but because I needed to know what the world would see before it decided how to treat me that day. School was loud, even when no one was talking to me. Laughter traveled fast there. Whispers traveled faster. I wasn't the kind of girl people noticed right away. I didn't speak too much in class. I didn't raise my hand unless I was sure. I learned early that attention could be dangerous if you didn't know how to wear it. Some days were fine, others weren't. Bullying didn't always come as shouting or pushing. Sometimes it was a look held for a second too long, a laugh that stopped when I turned around, a name said softly enough that teachers couldn't hear. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong, that I didn't care. But there were moments, small ones, when my chest felt tight for no clear reason, and I knew I was lying to myself. There was one place I felt safe, by the window at home. After school, I would sit there with my bag still on my shoulder, watching the light move slowly across the room. The sun didn't judge me. It didn't compare me to anyone else. It just stayed. At school, things felt different. The walls were bright, but the days felt dull. Teachers spoke, bells rang, life moved forward whether I felt ready or not. There was a boy in my class. I won't say his name. Some things feel better kept quiet. He didn't do anything special. That's why it mattered. He didn't laugh when others did. He didn't look away when I spoke. Once, he held the door open for me like it was the most normal thing in the world. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. I never told anyone, not my friends, not myself, really. It felt safer as a thought than a truth. As the weeks passed, something began to change. Posters appeared on the school walls. Teachers talked about a school summer campaign, a mix of activities, group projects, and an outing planned just before the holidays. People were excited. They always were. I wasn't. Things like that meant being seen, being grouped, being chosen or not. When the teacher announced we would be working in mixed teams, I felt that familiar tightness return. I looked down at my desk. I counted the lines scratched into the wood. I told myself to stay quiet. Then I heard my name. Not shouted, not mocked, just spoken. He was looking at me, the boy. "You can join our group," he said, like it was obvious, like it didn't cost him anything. I nodded before I could think. That afternoon, the light felt warmer than usual. Not brighter, just kinder. At home, I sat by the window again. But this time, I wasn't watching the light move away.
It feels good to be
I was
home
watching
again.
it stay. For the first time in a long while, I felt like something ahead of me was open. Not perfect, not easy, just possible. And I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of the summer where the light stayed a little longer. The school campaign started quietly. No big announcement, no music or banners, just a list of names on the notice board and a schedule pinned beside it. I stood there longer than I needed to, pretending to read the details even after I had already memorized my group number. People gathered in small circles around me, some excited, some already laughing. I felt that familiar instinct to step back, to disappear into the background before anyone could decide where I belonged. Group work always made things clearer than I wanted. It showed you who wanted you around and who didn't even notice you were there. The first meeting was in one of the old classrooms. The windows were tall, letting in pale afternoon light that stretched across the desks. Dust floated in the air like it was part of the lesson. I chose a seat near the edge. I always did. One by one, the others arrived. They sat close to each other, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor. Their voices filled the room easily, like they had practiced being confident. Then he walked in. He didn't look around the room the way others did. He just came in, set his bag down, and sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and strangely, that felt comfortable. The teacher explained the campaign. We would work together for several weeks, prepare ideas, participate in a school outing, present something at the end of summer. I heard the words, but they felt distant. All I could think about was time. Weeks meant exposure. Exposure meant attention, and attention had never been kind to me. After the teacher left, silence fell. The kind that waits to see who will break it first. Someone did. A girl across the room smiled, not at me, and started talking about ideas. Everyone nodded. Plans formed quickly without my voice included. I didn't interrupt. I never did. But then he looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just direct. My heart jumped in a way I didn't like. Or maybe I did. "I think it could work," I said quietly. That was all. But no one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. He nodded, like my words mattered. That night, I replayed that moment over and over, not because it was big, but because it wasn't cruel. School can teach you many things. One of them is how rare kindness can feel. As the days went on, our group met more often, sometimes in classrooms, sometimes under the trees near the field. The others talked easily. I listened. Bullying doesn't always show itself openly. Sometimes it hides inside silence, inside being talked over, inside being forgotten. There were moments when I felt it again, the quiet exclusion, the way conversations shifted when I spoke. But there were also moments that surprised me. He always waited, always made space. When we worked in pairs, he didn't rush ahead. He didn't act like he was helping. He just stayed. That alone felt like something new. One afternoon, as we packed our bags, I heard laughter behind me. Not the warm kind. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Some things you recognize instantly, even without seeing them. I walked home faster that day. The sky was bright, but I didn't notice it. At home, I went straight to my room and sat by the window. The light was still there, spreading slowly across the floor. I watched it like I always did, waiting for the tightness in my chest to loosen. I told myself not to care, that it didn't matter what they thought. But that night I wrote in my notebook longer than usual. I wrote about the classroom, about the trees, about the way kindness could feel so quiet and still change everything. As the campaign continued, something shifted inside me. Not suddenly, not completely, but enough to notice. I started looking forward to the meetings, not because of the work, but because of the way I felt there, less invisible. The outing date was announced one morning, a trip outside the city, a place surrounded by open land and sky. People cheered. I felt nervous. Trips meant being seen in a different way, outside the safety of routines. But part of me, a small, careful part, felt something else too. Curiosity. On the day we prepared for the trip, the sun stayed out longer than usual. The classrooms glowed softly in the late afternoon. I stood by the window again, watching light stretch and refuse to leave, and for the first time, I wondered if this summer might become something I wouldn't want to forget. The morning of the outing arrived earlier than I expected. I woke up before my alarm, the room still quiet, the sky pale and undecided. For a moment, I lay there wondering if I could pretend to be sick. It would have been easy. No explanations, no questions. But something inside me didn't want to hide this time. I got dressed slowly, smoothing my uniform more than usual, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel ready. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, like the day itself was holding its breath. At school, buses waited near the gate. Students gathered in small groups, laughing loudly, claiming seats before anyone else could. I stood near the edge again, holding my bag tightly, watching the noise happen around me. Then he appeared beside me. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked, smiling softly. I shook my head. "Not really." "Me neither," he said. "These things always feel bigger before they start." I nodded, surprised at how true that felt. On the bus, I chose a seat near the window. I always liked watching things move away. The engine started. The school gates slowly disappeared behind us. As we drove, buildings gave way to open roads. Concrete softened into trees. Noise faded into wind. Sunlight poured through the glass, warming my face. I rested my forehead lightly against the window and watched the sky stretch wider than I was used to. It felt like breathing after holding it in for too long. Around me, conversations rose and fell, some loud, some careless, but inside I felt quiet, in a good way. At one point, the bus slowed and he leaned over from the seat behind me. "Look," he whispered. Outside, fields opened in long, endless lines of green. The sky above them felt impossibly large. I smiled without thinking. When we arrived, the place felt unreal. Open land, tall trees, light everywhere. Teachers gave instructions, groups were called, rules were repeated. But all I noticed was how different everything looked outside the walls of school. Here, no one was boxed in by desks. No bells told us when to move. The air didn't feel heavy with expectations. We walked together toward the camp area. Gravel crunched under our shoes. The sun filtered through leaves, creating patterns on the ground. For once, I wasn't trying to disappear. During activities, I stayed close to the group, but didn't force myself into the center. I listened. I helped when I could. No one told me to stop talking. No one laughed. That alone felt like a small miracle. Later, during a break, I sat on a low bench watching others laugh near the field. I felt something unfamiliar settle inside me. Belonging. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. He sat down beside me without asking. "This place is nice," he said. "Yeah, it feels lighter." He nodded. "School feels different out here." I didn't say it, but I was thinking the same thing. As the afternoon stretched on, the light shifted slowly. Shadows grew longer, softer. Nothing felt rushed. I realized then that no one was watching me the way I feared. No one was counting my mistakes. I was just there. When the sun dipped lower, we gathered again. Teachers called names. The day began to fold in on itself. On the bus ride back, I watched the sky turn warmer, deeper. Orange melted into blue. He sat beside me this time. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. As the school came back into view, something inside me tightened gently, not from fear, but from knowing this feeling wouldn't last forever. Still, as I stepped off the bus, the light lingered. It stayed on the pavement, on our faces, on the quiet space between us. And I knew, without fully understanding why, that this outing had changed something. Not the world, just Me. After the outing, school didn't feel the same. The buildings were still there. The desks hadn't moved. The bells still rang at the same times. But something inside me had shifted, and I couldn't unfeel it. I walked through the halls a little slower, not because I wanted attention, but because I no longer felt the need to rush away from it. People still talked, still laughed, still whispered, but their voices didn't reach as deep as they used to. During group meetings, I noticed small changes. Someone waited for me to finish speaking. Someone asked for my opinion without sounding bored. They were small things, almost invisible, but they mattered. He stayed the same, and that consistency meant more than I expected. He never teased me, never tried to impress me, never acted like he was doing me a favor by being kind. Sometimes we walked together after meetings, just a few steps before heading in different directions. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Silence didn't feel awkward with him. It felt safe. One afternoon, we stayed behind to clean up after a meeting. The classroom was quiet, sunlight pouring in through the windows, turning dust into floating gold. I stacked papers carefully, pretending not to notice him nearby. "You're different lately," he said gently. I froze for a second. Different was a word I didn't trust. "Different how?" I asked. He shrugged. "You look like you're not hiding as much." I laughed softly, surprised. I didn't know I was that obvious. He smiled. "Only if you're paying attention." That stayed with me. For the first time, I wondered what it would be like to be seen, not judged, not measured, just understood. Bullying didn't disappear completely. It never does. There were still looks, still moments when laughter felt sharp, but I noticed something else too. They didn't control me the way they used to. Their words didn't echo as loudly in my head. Their silence didn't feel like a sentence anymore. I had something else now. Not popularity, not protection, just belief in myself. As summer moved closer, days grew longer. Light lingered in the hallways after classes ended. The sky stayed bright even when it should have been fading. One evening, I stayed late at school to help prepare for the final campaign presentation. Most people had already left. I stood by a window, watching the sun dip slowly, painting the schoolyard gold. He came to stand beside me. "Funny how light changes everything," he said. "Yeah, it makes things look softer. Or clearer," he added. I thought about that. Maybe I had been seeing myself in harsh lighting for too long. Maybe I was learning to see myself the way the light did, gently. We talked more after that, not about big dreams, not about the future, just about music, about classes we liked, about things that made us laugh when no one else was around. There was no confession, no dramatic moment, just closeness growing quietly, and somehow that felt more real. On my way home those days, I noticed the sky more, the way clouds caught fire at sunset, the way evenings stretched like they didn't want to end. I started writing again, not to escape, but to remember. I wrote about school, about the outing, about how kindness could change the shape of a day. And sometimes, when I wrote his name, I didn't cross it out, I let it stay. As summer officially arrived, teachers talked about endings, about moving forward, about change. Normally, that would have scared me, but this time I felt ready. Not because I had everything figured out, but because I had learned something important. I didn't need to disappear to survive. I could stay. I could be seen. And even if the light eventually moved on, I would remember how it felt when it stayed. The final weeks of the campaign arrived without warning. One day we were still planning and adjusting, and the next, teachers were talking about presentations, deadlines, and endings. Endings always sounded heavier than beginnings. I noticed it in the way people moved, a little faster, a little louder, like they were trying to hold on to something before it slipped away. For me, it felt different. I wasn't trying to hold on. I was paying attention. The group met more often now, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes after classes ended, when the halls grew quiet and the light softened. I spoke more during those meetings, not because I forced myself to, but because I no longer felt afraid of my own voice. And when I did speak, people listened. Not always, not perfectly, but enough. There was one afternoon when it happened again, the laughter. I was walking down the hallway alone, carrying a stack of papers, when I heard it behind me. It wasn't loud, it didn't stop the world, but I felt it. For a moment, the old instinct returned, the urge to shrink, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. I slowed my steps. Then I did something new. I kept walking. I didn't turn around. I didn't run. I just kept going. And something unexpected happened. The sound lost its power. That was when I understood. Not everything deserves a reaction. Some things fade when you stop feeding them your fear. Later that day, he found me near the lockers. He asked, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." He studied my face for a moment, then smiled softly. "You seem stronger." I didn't argue, because for the first time, I believed it too. The presentation day arrived under a wide, open sky. Sunlight spilled across the school grounds like it had nowhere else to be. Students gathered, teachers watched, voices echoed. When it was our turn, I stood with my group, hands steady, heart calm. I spoke clearly, not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. When it was over, there was applause, not thunderous, not overwhelming, but real. As we stepped away, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not pride, peace. That evening, I walked home slowly. The sun was low, painting the streets gold. Everything looked familiar, and yet different. I realized then that summer hadn't changed the world around me. It had changed the way I stood inside it. At home, I sat by my window one last time, watching the light stretch across the floor. It lingered, just as it always had. But now, I wasn't afraid of when it would leave. I knew I would carry it with me. The confidence, the quiet courage, the memory of being seen. The summer was moving forward. So was I. And even as the days began to shorten, even as routines returned, I knew something for certain, that summer didn't just stay a little longer, it taught me how to stay. When the campaign ended, school didn't immediately feel empty. It felt quiet, like a room after everyone has stepped outside for a moment. The pressure was gone, the schedules loosened, the days opened up again. Summer had officially arrived. Without meetings to attend or plans to prepare, I suddenly had time to think, time to notice things I used to rush past. I noticed how mornings sounded different now, less hurried, birds louder than alarms, light slipping into my room earlier, as if curious. I walked to school on the last few days without feeling the usual tightness in my chest. The hallways felt softer, like they were slowly letting go of us. People talked about holidays, trips, and new beginnings. Some sounded excited, some sounded afraid. I felt somewhere in between. He and I spent more time together, not in planned ways, but in small, accidental moments, running into each other near the gate, sharing a quiet walk after class, sitting on the steps outside school while the sky changed colors. There was still no confession, no dramatic shift, but there was closeness, and closeness, I learned, doesn't always need words. One afternoon, we sat together under a tree near the field. The air was warm, the grass dry beneath us. "Do you ever wish time would slow down?" he asked. "All the time," I said. He smiled. "Me too." We sat there, watching shadows move, saying nothing more, and somehow that was enough. As summer days passed, I spent more time outside, walking, writing, letting my thoughts stretch without fear. The bullying voices faded further into the background, not because they disappeared, but because I had grown louder inside myself. I started noticing other people like me, the quiet ones, the ones who watched more than they spoke. I smiled at them. Sometimes they smiled back. That felt important. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I realized something gently and clearly. I was no longer waiting for summer to save me. I had already changed. The light still stayed longer in the evenings, but now I knew it would eventually move on. And that was okay, because I wasn't afraid of the dark the way I used to be. As summer reached its deepest days, everything felt suspended, like the world had decided not to rush for once. Afternoons stretched lazily into evenings. The sky softened earlier, holding on to warmth like it was reluctant to let go. I spent more time by my window again, not to hide, but to reflect. I thought about the girl I had been before this summer, the one who stayed quiet out of fear, the one who believed being unseen was safer. I didn't hate her. I understood her. She did the best she could with what she knew. One evening, I met him near the school gate without planning to. We both slowed when we saw each other, like neither of us wanted to leave the first. "Summer feels different this year," he said. "It does," I replied, "like it taught me something." He looked at me for a moment, thoughtful. "I think it taught me too." We walked together for a while, our steps matching without effort. The street was quiet, bathed in gold. "I'm glad we worked together," he said softly. "I am too," I answered. That was it. No confession, no promise, just truth. And somehow that felt more real than anything dramatic ever could. As days passed, I began preparing myself for change, for new classes, new challenges, new versions of myself. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I knew something important. Even when light moves on, it leaves something behind. Confidence doesn't shout. Courage doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up, quietly, and stays. On the last evening before routines returned, I stood outside watching the sun dip low. The sky burned softly, colors melting into each other. I closed my eyes and let the warmth rest on my face. I didn't wish for time to stop. I didn't beg the moment to stay. I simply let it be. Because I knew someday, in another season of my life, when things feel heavy or uncertain again, I will remember this. I will remember a summer where kindness found me quietly, where I learned I didn't have to disappear to belong, where light stayed a little longer, long enough to change me. And when the sun lingers just a bit in the evening, when shadows stretch gently across the ground, I will smile, because part of that summer will always stay with me.